Female sexuality has always been a very controversial topic. It seems that there is now this battle between the side of sexual liberation and the restriction of sexual expression. As women, this can leave us feeling very confused, and it can actually perpetuate the shame and the guilt that we have carried around regarding our sexuality. In this episode, I'm going to explore why both archetypes of the sacred prostitute and the virgin are needed components to the healthy expression of female sexuality. My name is Silvana, and I am a course creator and the founder of the Venusian Academy, a space for the exploration of the divine feminine arts and Shakta Tantra. If you'd like to join the Academy, please check the description box below for my current offerings. First thing to understand in this conversation is that both of these archetypes are actually more similar than they are different. But before we even go there, I think the first question to ask is, why is female sexuality so triggering for the entire world? So we have to understand the role of women in nature as lunar reflective beings, because from this lens, we understand that female sexuality and the expression of female sexuality triggers very strong impulses and reactions in the people that are witnessing it. These expressions can trigger lust, anger, jealousy, hatred. And we can see it all over the media and in our own personal lives. And what has happened whenever there's a woman that is like in her full expression? What is it that we feel? What is it that we perceive in other people? What are the projections that get thrown in that direction? And just taking a look at that, we can see the amount of power and churning force that female sexuality and the expression of it has on other people. As the lunar responsive beings, this means that they naturally churn and instigate the natural animalistic instinct of those that desire to interact with that specific expression of sexuality. And I wanted to mention this at the beginning of the exploration because since we're gonna talk about the sacred prostitute archetype and then the virgin, there's already a natural bias. It's almost like virgin good, prostitute bad, and that's what we're going to dismantle here. So I'm going to start with the sacred prostitute archetype. First thing to identify is the differences between the archetype of the sacred prostitute and modern prostitutes. Like, what is the difference between these two energies? Because it's drastically different. So the modern day prostitute, whenever we think of a prostitute, there's like usually a few things that come up to mind. One is like your typical, bad neighborhood woman standing in the corner of the block and getting up in cars, getting in cars, going to some hotel, and usually sexually serving the lowest of the low. And then there's the other side of it, which is like this escort prostitution, which is a little bit more glamorized, but it's almost like niche to the powerful and the wealthy and the ones that can afford the higher quality prostitute. Both of these energies are part of pratiki. They are part of like the natural manifestation of the earth in the human kingdom. These women hold a very important role in the health of the planet because they become the outlets for the repressed sexual expression of certain individuals that otherwise have no space to really express that part of themselves. And sexual energy being our primary life force energy, it holds a lot. And whenever there are distortions and those distortions have nowhere to go, they kind of keep getting repressed deeper into the life force of the person. And eventually the only way that they can find an outlet is through sexuality, through like the sexual expression. So whenever we look at the women of the world that are like the modern day prostitutes, they are saying yes to an energetic expression that maybe other women that are not in that energy said no to. And in that being a yes and the opportunity for those people to express that sexuality, give life to that sexual expression, they are purifying it from the person and from the world. So the energy of the prostitutes is sacred from the perspective of maintaining a natural balance in nature. This doesn't mean that that is the sacred prostitute. So let's explore the energy of the sacred prostitute as an ancient archetype. The sacred prostitute gives fully of herself and her body as a lunar responsive component to a particular solar energy. So for example, if they were sacred prostitutes that were assigned to a specific temple, they responded to the solar energy of the deity that that temple was built for. In a way, they belonged to the temples. So obviously times have changed and we live very different lives and we don't have these ancient respected temples. As a matter of fact, most of us have a strong response and a reaction to like churches and organizations like that, right? And it's difficult to connect this ancient temple life to modern life in the West. So the sacred prostitute in the modern world is about surrendering to your own sexual energy and its full expression by choosing the solar energy that you'll actually respond to. So what is the solar component that the sacred prostitute in us is surrendering to? And the key of it is in the word sacred. The sacred prostitute offers her body to the sacred. So what is the sacred in your life? Answering that question is what will allow you to understand the dynamic that you personally have with the archetype of the sacred prostitute. Because from whatever is sacred, you develop values from that part. Values come from the sacred. We start creating values in our own life by staying as close to the sacred and divine as possible. So the sacred prostitute archetype lights up in the women that are deeply connected to the sacred within and allow themselves the full surrender of sexual expression when that energy shows up in their lives. In order to understand your own internal sacred prostitute archetype, the first question that you need to be able to answer and feel in your heart is, what is sacred to you? I'm not going to give you too many examples because I often find that examples, like every time I give examples, it's like, oh, I'm not none of those things. And I'm like, I know, that was just an example. It's almost like it limits people. So I'm going to give one example just to kind of, so you can feel where this is going. And then just go back to the question, what is sacred to me? And in the activation of the sacred prostitute archetype, it's like my body belongs and responds to that sacredness. So on the path of the lover, which is the path of the women that are trying to find divinity in the loving relationship with another human being, the sacred becomes the object of your love, your partner. So for the path of the lover, the sacred prostitute archetype gets activated in actual sexuality with your partner. There are many paths that women take, but I find that at least for my audience, this is like there's a majority of that path, of the lover path, of trying to, even the attraction of Tantra comes from this desire of like merging with another human being to be able to experience the reunion of two becoming one again. So under this light, we understand like the sacredness of that is the relationship to the divine element. And the prostitute part of the sacred prostitute archetype belongs to the woman that gives her body, the full surrender of the body as a responsive element of the sexuality of the person that is holding the solar polarity. So having said this, I'm gonna add another layer that might make it a little bit confusing for a while, but then it will click. It should click. We'll see how I do explaining it. The sacred prostitute can only exist if the virgin is also expressed. The virgin archetype is sovereign in her own sexuality, meaning that she belongs to herself. The prostitute belongs to the other, belongs to the sacred. It becomes the responsive force to the solar energy that's present. The archetype of the virgin is sovereign in herself, which means her sexuality belongs to herself. But in belonging to herself, that is being directed towards the divine. This energy means that it is clean of imprints, either positive or negative imprints of others. It is a self-giving process of being in sexual connection fully with herself in honor of the divine. From this lens, we understand that the virgin archetype is free from rules around sexuality, around what they should or shouldn't do sexually. And the gift of this archetype is to question where these rules and shoulds and shouldn'ts are really coming from. So the virgin belongs to herself and responds to the divine. And I don't think that a woman is either one or the other. I think like the most effective way of really playing and incorporating these archetypes is to live both, because they're not contradictory. On the contrary, they are complementary. And they are a prerequisite on the path of Tantra. To be able to have the purity of the virgin, meaning the programming from all the imprints, shoulds, and shoulders that were given to us by society, and embracing the sacred prostitute, the one that liberates her sexual expression and responds to the object of her love and devotion. So if I were to give you an elevator pitch of the difference between the sacred prostitute archetype and the virgin archetype, will be, for the sacred prostitute archetype, is the perception of the body as an instrument of lunar power that responds to the object of her love and devotion. And for the virgin, the body as a container for sexual energy that is only penetrated by the divinity of herself. So from that, we can easily embody both. The modern sacred prostitute has the standards of the virgin, and it's only available to the most virile and divine partner to penetrate her sexual field. This is how these two archetypes can really transform our own sexual energy. And embracing both of these and learning to apply the gifts of both into our life will help with the purification of our sexual energy. And remember that our sexual energy is what we use for our spiritual growth. Is that Kundalini energy, the life force, the chi, and it's sacred. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like and subscribe. And if you'd like to learn more about Chakra Tantra, I have a mentorship program called Parani, and you can find all the information about it in the description box below. All right, my friends, I'll see you guys next time.